Hey guys, have you ever wanted to be on a podcast talking about all things theology? If so, listen closely because Downer Church is the first spin-off show to the System is Down podcast. On most Mondays at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, we host a completely open discussion on Skype about whatever you guys are pondering in theology, and everyone is welcome to join. Whether you believe in Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Cthulhu, the flying spaghetti monster, or nothing at all, you are personally invited to join us for a fun, raw, no-agenda chat about whatever theological topic comes up, and nothing at all is out of bounds. You can currently listen to episodes of the show on YouTube if you are a general audience, or on Podbean if you are a Downers Club member. So come be a part of the show, help us redefine church, and revolutionize podcasting on the Downer Church podcast. For more information on how you can join the discussion, just visit tsidpod.com/church. The following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
What is up, Downers? Welcome back to the least comfortable show on the web, The System is Down. My name is Dan Smots, and if you're new here, this show is a place where we talk about all things uncomfortable, namely but not limited to conspiracies, politics, and religion. And today we're talking about Waco, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a conspiracy to take political action on a religious group. So, slam dunk on all three counts. And it's a really crazy, interesting story, and I want to get to it as quickly as possible. But before we do, I gotta let you know about two things. The first, of course, being the Downers Club. The Downers Club is our patron group where you can contribute as little as $1 a month and help keep the show going, help keep the show building, keep the lights on, everything flowing smoothly. Do your part, and in return, you get a plethora of weekly bonus audio content. The last couple weeks, I think we've done a minimum of 3 bonus episodes a week. Craig and I do a show called The Anti-News, which is just our hot takes on what is happening in the world. Remzo Martinez and I do Would You Rather Wednesday, which is where we just play the most horrifying game of Would You Rather that we can. We do Downer Church, which is just open theological discussions that you can be a part of, as you heard in the ad at the top of the show. We do Rotten Potatoes movie and TV reviews, and whenever I can, I do extended interviews with the guests that come on for Monday's episode. So, tons and tons of content being basically given to you for free. You can walk around for a month looking at the ground and easily find at least $1. So go check that out, help support the show, give a little something back, and get a whole bunch in return. You can join by going to tsidpod.com/support. Also, if you're not already a member of the System is Down forum, it is our free, open, uncomfortable conversation forum where you can just come in and talk about all these topics that we dig into and whatever you have on your mind. Most of the guests that come on the show are also members of the forum, so if you have questions for them, you can just go tag them and ask them directly. Or if you want to come in there and tell me how I'm running my show poorly, you can do that as well. You can tell me that I ramble on for way too long at the top of the show, whatever you want. So if you'd like to be a part of that, just go to tsidpod.com/forum, or just go to Facebook and type in the System is Down forum on your little keyboard, and it should pop right up. It's a closed group, so you'll have to request to join, but if you look like a human being, I will let you in, no problem at all. Now, on to the real thing that you're here for, my discussion with Craig and Justin about the American tragedy that is Waco. Let's get weird. My guest today is Justin last name. He wishes to remain anonymous because that's how crazy we're getting into this topic. Justin, do you have a preferred alias that you would like to go by?
We could go by Justin. Seems apt.
Good one. Good.
It's actually Justin Timberlake. He just doesn't want us to know.
And that beautiful voice you just heard was my co-pilot, Craig, for this episode. Craig, how's it going?
Oh, it's going the same old.
Yeah? Well, we're doing a bit of a round table. It's more of a triangular table because it's just the three of us discussion on the topic of Waco today, which is actually a topic that I knew almost literally nothing about before Justin brought it up to me. I knew that there was some sort of conspiracy, some sort of skirmish, and that was about it. And I knew that Alex Jones and Bill Hicks both loved it, and that's about the extent of my knowledge, or at least it was a few weeks ago. So Very interesting topic. Definitely wanted to dig into it. And Justin, you are you've dug into this pretty extensively. So yeah, you are here to be our expert. Do you accept?
Unfortunately.
Right.
Do you accept the expert role?
Unfortunately.
All right.
I'll accept it. Yeah.
Let me just say before this, the amount that I knew about it. See, it couldn't have been too long after the fact, because I remember our mom, me and your mom, Daniel.
Yes.
She had made some joke about, which why would you make a joke about it? But she had made some joke about the Branch Davidians or something like that, just like kind of a cult joke or something, or oh, it's just another cult like the Davidians or something like that, something weird like that. And I remember asking who the Davidians were, and I remember her saying this guy who thought he was Jesus went and took a bunch of hostages and lit everybody on fire. That's about as far as that conversation went. But thinking back to it, that couldn't have been long after, because I remember I had to have been really young when having this conversation.
Yeah.
And so this happened in 93, which would have made me about 8 at the time. So it's probably roughly right around that time that she was already joking about it. Too soon already, Mom. Come on.
Terrible person, our mother.
No, you're not alone on that. I remember when I first started researching this, and I went to ask my father about it. I was like, Dad, do you remember Waco? He was like, oh yeah, that was those religious nuts, and they killed themselves. And I was like,
Right.
Yeah, really? So he was like, yeah.
It's funny how that has become the ongoing story, and the only thing that people know is they believed something weird, and they were out in this place, and now they're dead. That's pretty much the extent of common knowledge.
Until recently, I always got them and Jonestown mixed up. I was always like, yeah, Waco, the guys who drank the Kool-Aid, right? And no, that's not it at all.
That's what the media tried to do. I mean, that they really were just painting these as a bunch of crazy religious kooks. And I mean, I was an infant at the time when this happened, but from my understanding of talking with people who grew up during it and remember it, I mean, that's what the people believed. I mean, all the people thought, these guys were just a bunch of religious nut jobs, and it was their fault.
Right.
Yep.
Well,
so where do we want to start?
Let's get into it.
Yeah,
let's get into the background of them so we can actually have an understanding of who the Davidians actually were.
Yeah, let's give a kind of a brief overview of the whole spectrum, and then we can start tearing apart.
Sure. So basically, the Branch Davidians were a sect of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I think they broke off for some, I don't know the politics behind the reason they broke off, but it was back in the 50s. There were various leaders that moved out to Waco, Texas, and eventually, through various internal politics, David Koresh, and that's not his real name. His real name, I think, was Vernon Howell.
Vernon,
correctly.
The name of a true savior.
Yeah, he kind of became their de facto leader, and it really kind of the Davidians came onto the radar because of there were a couple things. They were engaged in the gun business, so they had owned a lot of weapons. I mean, they were Texans, so that's just par for the course. But they also bought them, sold them. They saw it as an investment. I mean, it was back then as well. So you could buy a gun one day, sell it a year later for a profit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But so there was some skepticism around that. The ATF, they wanted to justify their budget. President Clinton had just been elected. There was concerns about cutting back certain bureaus, and looking into getting a big gun busting ring was probably a good call on their part. Mm-hmm. There were a couple other things. There were some claims that David Koresh had been involved in some underage marriages, which is not really clear about that.
Let me jump in for a second, going back to the gun thing.
Sure.
Before we get too far away from it, the whole basis of their sect of religion was almost like, they make them out to sound crazy, all these like gun collecting, like what's it called, apocalypse fearing cult. But what it basically was a religion of what's the word I'm looking for? Preppers. was a prepper religion, basically. They were prepping for the end of the world. They were one of the reasons, besides collecting, one of the reasons for collecting weapons was if the world comes to an end, they want to be prepared for it, and they want to be able to defend themselves. When their thought was that the government, Babylon is what they called the evil government, not necessarily America, but a Babylon government was going to come against their religion, and they were going to have to defend themselves. So that was a reason for stockpiling the weapons. Yeah. And then,
so Justin, you say they were also dealing, like they were selling and.
They
like
would
gun show type selling, not like illegal selling, like gun shows and stuff.
Yeah, it's actually kind of incredible. When I was reading into the gun part, even before the whole thing happened, anytime there was any question on the side of the Davidians if what they were doing was legal or not, I mean, they were very friendly with their local sheriffs. They would go down, ask, are these parts okay? Are these modifications acceptable? Is this all within the law? There was never really anything that was hidden. It was just sort of the standard firearms.
I think at one point in one of the documentaries we watched, a member of the ATF claims that he had called, like once he knew he was under suspicion, David Koresh had called in to discuss it with the ATF, and they're like, we got David on the phone. And somebody a little higher up was like, no, don't take that call. And this was like shortly before the raid. So
yeah, exactly. So what happened was the ATF was talking with their one of their dealers, like one of the guys that the Davidians would be working with, about their firearm ownership, and the dealer said, "Hey, I got Koresh on the phone if you want to talk to him right now." And Koresh knew, and he was ready to go talk with them. But the ATF at that time, this was, I think, the previous year in '92, was like, no, the ATF did not want to engage just yet. It's not actually pretty clear. It's not immediately clear why that was the case.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right. If we're gonna kind of, which I kind of suspected we would, instead of giving an overview, if you want to kind of just keep telling the story and digging into pieces of it, that might be easier, which is kind of what we're doing. But before we do that, I think we should talk about just kind of the suspicions around what was going on, because I mean, there's all these allegations of like child sex stuff or like multiple wives, which is pretty pretty documented as fact for the wives. But but all the people in the neighboring community say that these people were weird and different, but they were also extremely knowledgeable in scripture, and they were extremely friendly, and they had not really a bad thing to say about them to their knowledge at the time. Do we know like where the allegations came from for the child sex issues and that type of thing?
Yeah, so there were a few cases of Davidians who decided to leave the church, and there was some small disagreements there. It's not immediately obvious what was going on from the research I did, but anytime that any claims were made, I mean, CPS did go to visit their home and found no evidence of any wrongdoing. And the one case of this one girl who testified in front of Congress after the fact about having been molested by Koresh was being paraded around by her father in many media outlets. So, I mean, for all I know, Koresh did do some pretty weird stuff, and frankly, maybe he did. It's definitely documented that he was with multiple wives. It's definitely documented he had fathered multiple children, and
which is justification for arresting David Koresh.
That's not even it. That's justification for the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Right. If they were concerned about the children. ATF, what does that have to do with ATF at all?
Right.
But absolutely nothing.
About his, I'm not going to say one way or another whether or not he was engaging in bad stuff with children or underage or stuff that should be questionable. But I think like Justin said, it was documented he had up to like 7 wives or something like that.
He had like 20-something wives, I believe. I was just watching an ABC thing before we got on here. It was like 20 to 30 by the end.
They were talking about how some of them are... I didn't hear the youngest. I think somebody may have mentioned like 11. However, in Texas, even now, 14-year-olds can get married with their parents' consent. Yeah. So if there was a lot of age issues,
but there was a lot of things that could really skirt by legally, based on what their laws were at the time.
Because none of the parents are coming out, except for maybe this one that the girl is going around, and the one actual witness to it. No other parent is saying, hey, he was doing this or this to my child. If anything, they were all in on it. So if the girl was 14 or older, there's nothing you can do about it based on even today's Texas marriage laws. So for
all of
them
that is,
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was going to say, all of that aside, and you're absolutely right. If we were to assume that it was the case that he was doing, easily immoral and then debatably illegal things, that does not justify anything about what we're just about to get into.
Right.
I mean, that,
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, like I said, all of this plays into this story that should end with, and he was arrested, and they were all set free, and everything was fine. Right? That's what happened.
And even the people of the town came out afterwards and said, he's out in town almost every single day. He goes jogging by here. He comes into my restaurant and eats almost every day.
He could have every day.
Yeah, at any point they could have just picked him up and thrown him in the back of a van, and nothing would have happened, or just arrested him right there in the street, put cuffs on him, and taken him in.
Right.
And
they didn't.
That would have been the end of it.
And to clarify, I don't think we've said it yet, but this is all, like, this whole community and commune is happening in, like, a compound, like a little, I don't know what you call it, Mount Carmel.
Like a base.
It's like a base, yeah.
So I don't think you guys are doing this on purpose, but I think you might have drunk some of the Kool-Aid using the terms compound and base, because the entire thing was militarized by the FBI and the ATF to make it seem like these guys were terrible people. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong for saying
No, you're
that.
absolutely right. Like, words are tricky. I'm looking for the right word. Just a
There's
community,
a collection
basically.
of houses. It was built from scratch by these people, and I think it's worth clarifying because I think that I don't remember if this was during the recorded session or on our pre-show chatter. These people were compared to the Jonestown cult people. And the idea was that Koresh was this sort of like, leader that was mesmerizing and capturing these people. But these people here were on their own free volition. They were from around the world. It was multicultural. There were people from England.
Doctors coming over from England to join this religion, and they wanted to learn. Their excuse was, I want to learn the Bible, and he knows a ton about the Bible. And he didn't have that. Jones was his. What was his first name? I can't think of his name. Anyway, that guy had like a mesmerizing voice where like he almost hypnotized you when he talked. If you guys, I'm sure, listened to David Koresh, he did not have that mesmerizing voice.
Exactly a beautiful motivational speaker.
He talks like Joe Dirt. Nothing to be mesmerized to.
Yeah, and like I said, I was watching an ABC thing that I think just came out last year on the Waco stuff. Either last year or early this year, which is this month. But, just the whole thing is spun in such these were crazy people, and this guy was just convincing them, like, he's so manipulative, and he's just speaks so beautifully and convinces everybody that he's right. It's like, I'm not hearing that. I'm not getting that. And for people to come from miles and miles away to listen to this guy speak, and, husbands were like eventually giving up their wives to this man, like, because it was God's will, which is crazy, yes, but to say that it was just because he was such a great speaker is crazy. He I don't know. Clearly he did something right, but I don't get it.
So I guess to summarize everything we've just said about the sort of the background leading up to the initial serving of the warrant, which we'll get into that in a second. Basically, these were a bunch of people from around the world, who all shared a similar faith. There was no real complaints amongst anyone in the town other than that they were kind of a bunch of weird people. Mm-hmm. They were very open with the local government. They were just selling guns like any Texan in the 90s would do.
Sure.
And just wanted to worship the way they wanted to worship.
Not that much different than today, either.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Slightly more non-conventional from the traditional Christian values that you would see in like Texas or something like that. And I think that might have had a big part to play in it. It's just
not that far from it.
No, but
you have a central figure, and that's the difference.
And my thing is, one thing, talking about cults before we move on to the event, every single cult that we go to, like we become uncomfortable with, they always have the same things in common, like pedophilia and multiple wives, and they're always like violent people, and they're always taking like holding their people hostage or mesmerizing. It's just like this. It's like out of the cult book. It's like,
right.
If you want to be a cult leader, you have to follow this book, or that's just what they tell us to get us to not like somebody that's slightly different.
Well, yeah, the term cult, I mean, obviously they weren't calling themselves a cult.
Right.
That was put on them, and that could be put on Christianity, it could be put on Scientology, Mormonism, everything, which it has been on all of those things. What's the difference other than time? Like, you've got people starting a religion based on a book.
Somebody had said the difference between a cult and a religion is 100 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I can't remember who said that. I'm going to have to find it and put it in the notes or something.
Yep. Anyway, Justin, you were summarizing. Go ahead.
All right. No, I think that's it. So I think eventually what led to the initial confrontation was they've been wanting to get these people for weapons violations, whatever that means. And another thing that's worth bringing up too is that there was allegedly a methamphetamine production facility at their place.
All of a sudden.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, it was based upon some heat map photograph that turned out to, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was not them making meth.
Sure.
So it's interesting that they thought that, quote unquote. So they actually teamed up with the ATF teamed up with the military to prepare.
The way to get them to team with the military was they punched it as a drug raid, and so that makes sense. The meth thing makes sense now.
So they based that entirely off of it was hotter in this area.
Pretty much is my understanding. It was just a really bad photograph, like a photograph that said, this is hot, and only things that are hot are meth labs.
Right.
I mean, maybe there was something else, but it was a very, very weak.
It's either
argument.
meth labs or they're burning their children.
Or maybe a boiler room or a hot tub. Who knows? Well, if that wraps up the introduction, let's get into the real story here. And once again, I'm assuming it is. They went in, they arrested this crazy guy, and they took him to jail. The end.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, if that was the case, then I'd be in a good mood right now. But that was not the case.
Yep.
So, watching these documentaries, didn't you just get more and more pissed as the more you watch? Mainly the congressional hearings and stuff like that. Watching Chuck Schumer talk, watching him just run his mouth just pissed me off, because the whole time he's like, obviously this doesn't happen, and you're the only one that believes that this would possibly happen. And then somebody from the ATF comes in and he's like, actually, we would use this for this if that were the case. And so I don't know.
For me, anytime somebody uses the word obviously, I'm already pissed, no matter what they're talking about. So
I felt a combination of anger, of depression. I mean, we'll get to it, but it was something. So it's let's go back in time. It's February 28th, 1993.
Where were you on February 28th, 1993?
I don't know if I could walk at that point. It's not clear.
I was drinking a surge and playing video games, probably.
You would have been 5.
Yeah, well, I was an early bloomer.
So it's early in the morning, and while the ATF is getting ready to go and serve their warrant, what's interesting to note is by the time the ATF agents had shown up, the news media was all there, and there was evidence and testimony by various news media personnel that they were tipped off by the ATF that something big is going to happen.
It was their press person. It was their like press relations, their PR person. Like, they called up several different stations, like not like national stations even, are like, oh, we just wanted a point of contact in case something goes down this weekend.
Yeah.
And
that was whose PR person?
The ATF's PR person called into media.
Yeah.
So the ATF, all right, there's a lot of things to go through here. So they were planning on this being a surprise, and up until that point, the ATF actually had an inside guy with the Davidians. When one of their agents was acting as if he was a Davidian and keeping tabs on everything that was going on. So that morning, one of the newsmen actually had warned a postman that was nearby the Mount Carmel that there was going to be a shootout soon. Well, it turns out that postman was a Branch Davidian, and he went back and told David Koresh and the people there that, hey, the ATF's coming. They have, they're coming for you guys. Mm-hmm. And David Koresh apparently knew that the guy, knew about the undercover agent and said, hey, look, I know you're an agent. You should go talk to these guys and tell them that I'll come out and talk with them, that there's nothing bad's going to happen. We'll work this out. So he left. The undercover agent left, went back to the ATF. So the ATF knew that their cover was blown before they even showed up. But that aside, they just kept on going. They didn't want to stop. They had shown up. There were helicopters circling the facility. There were agents showing up in cattle trucks. They were ready.
They rolled in like 75, 80 deep to give the search warrant. And then later claimed, we'll get into later claimed they were outgunned, like 75 ATF guys.
Right.
All the agents show up to serve their warrant. Now, first thing, when they show up, this is where things get a little murky because we don't have any of the 6 different videos of the initial encounter between David Koresh and Perry Jones at the front door and the ATF agents serving the warrant.
Right.
That videotape is missing.
That's not like conspiracy. That's not like, these are missing. Looking that, like in those congressional hearings, one of the guys on the stand was like, well, conveniently enough, we can't find those videotapes. And so this is like unknown. This is one of the known things that these videotapes are gone.
In my digging into it, I didn't even see that. That is mind-blowingly huge. I mean, we served them the papers and we shot video of it, but we lost that video. So
and the front door is missing too.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that. So the FBI claims that the Davidians shot first through the door. The Davidians claim that they were shot at first, and that's where the big trouble comes. Like, so who shot first? How does it happen?
Right.
Well, an obvious way to solve this thing first would be to look at the door. Mm-hmm. Well, as Craig alluded to a couple seconds ago, the door also is missing in evidence. The FBI lost the entire door with the bullet holes on it.
Before we get to that, I mean, the big issue with that and why that matters is because if what's the agency?
ATF.
If they shoot first, and the law states that if they are not using reasonable actions to achieve their goal, then the Branch Davidians have the right to defend themselves. They have the right to, shoot back. So it's a huge deal, whether or not they served them the papers, whether or not they discussed anything. As far as we can see at this point, to my knowledge, they rolled up and started shooting, or somebody started shooting.
Yeah, so the all evidence points that the ATF showed up. There was no intention of actually serving any papers, and this was backed up by testimony of multiple agents that they had all forgotten their search warrant in their cars. There's no evidence that the search warrant actually was there.
Was on
the
site.
Morning of, was on site. It's not clear at all if it was there.
Yeah, like you can tell when in the videos, because like you said, the news crew is there videotaping all of this. Mm-hmm. And what you can see beforehand is just them running up saying, please search warrant. And they're just instantly running at the door. It's not like even attempting to remain calm. Mm-hmm. And you're probably going to get into when David answers the door, I'm sure.
Right. So all evidence points to that the first shots were from the ATF taking out some of the dogs that the Davidians had out back. What eventually happens is they're getting shot. The shots are being exchanged. The ATF is on one side shooting in. The Davidians are responding. An interesting photograph that was taken moments after the ATF went to the front door shows, and I sent it to you both earlier, shows a bunch of ATF agents kneeling out in the open, So if they really were if they were ambushed by heavy Davidian gunfire, you'd expect all these people to be
hiding,
shot. But they look fine to me.
Yeah,
So
they're literally, there's 3 of them literally knelt on one knee, dropped to one knee, directly behind the door in that photo you sent us.
Right.
Like, the official story is the Davidians started shooting through the door. Well, the first thing you're going to do if you start receiving fire from behind a door is get away from that damn door, not drop to your knee and start shooting like back at that door. You're going to get away from the door.
Also, the big question is, if you are the Branch Davidians, why are you shooting through the door expecting to hit somebody instead of out of a window? Like, your first shot fired, let's just shoot out the door. Why not?
Yeah.
After David closed the door, too. Yeah. David came to the door, opened it, said, whoa, there's women and children here. He went to pull the door shut, and then supposedly the Davidians started shooting through the door. It's like, why wouldn't they open the door and just open fire?
Right. I mean, the women and children weren't standing right there. If you got guns back there that are about to shoot through the door, open the door, pick some people off, and then close the door.
Yeah, you'd think. So we're at this point. There's gunfire going on. We don't have any footage of the initial knock. We have lost the door, but there's gunfire happening. So what happens next is the Davidians are panicking.
Real quick, sorry to cut you off again. We keep saying lost the door. I don't know if we're being completely clear. This door, it matters a lot to determine where the gunshots were coming from, because if they're blowing through this way or that way, it's a big piece of evidence. Literally, we're not saying like, we've lost the door's blown off or whatever. No, the door was a piece of evidence, and the door is gone now. Somehow they lost that piece of evidence, and that can't be brought into the case.
The initial videotapes of the front door, and then the front door itself cannot be. They're nowhere to be found. So the 2 main pieces of evidence of who shot first just don't exist at all.
Yep, most important stuff. Sorry, Justin. Go ahead.
No, that's perfectly fine. So when I heard this, the documentaries we watched included a lot of 911 calls, and it's pretty interesting to note that the Davidians had no idea what was going on when they called 911.
Yeah,
that's
Davidians, really evident. It's very clear that they weren't planning this.
I think the guy's name was Steve Schneider, called the local sheriffs and said, "Hey, we're being shot at. Tell your guys to stop shooting at us." And the sheriff, I don't think, had any idea what was going on. Now, the sheriff tried to radio the ATF, but the ATF turned off their radios. They could not get contacted by the sheriff.
I don't think the ATF had radios, because later on you see them in videos telling the news guy to go call for an ambulance. So I don't think they even had methods of communication. That's how ill prepared they were. I mean, if they did shut them off,
I don't know if it's ill prepared. It might have been planned. Like, we don't need contact. We're gonna go in. We're gonna wipe these guys off the map, and then it doesn't matter. And then their guys started dying, and then they had to radio help.
Right, and like I said, they didn't even have a method to communicate or a backup plan if some of their guys did get shot, because they're yelling for the news guy, go call 911. And so it's just crazy to me that you want to at least have some kind of a backup for a medical evac situation when you are when there's a potential, obviously, that there's going to be something like this happen, even if it wasn't a planned.
Well, clearly, if you roll up with 3 trucks of artillery and guys on cattle trucks, something's going down. You're not just going to be there to serve papers and talk about it.
And if you've ever planned out any kind of, I don't know how the police does it, but in a military operation, at least in the very least, there's a bunch of logistical steps that have to go into that planning, which one would be in case of this, do this, in case of this, do this.
Right.
There's a lot of steps going into it. So
it's not just roll in and see what happens.
No, exactly. So, and I think I did see one ATF person had said in an interview, they're like, so was there an actual raid plan? And he had said there was pieces of a plan. They never had they'd never completely finished the plan. They're just all right, we got to do this now. Let's take what we got and go.
Right. Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears, and I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay. If it is just a raid plan, and they're just going to roll in and make stuff happen, like what do we know what those people said was their agenda exactly? Was it drugs? Was it sex? Was it guns? Do we know exactly?
The main after fact was the children were in danger, and that was the biggest
So roll
thing.
in and start shooting and see how many kids you save.
I mean, that's just their get people like emotionally riled up against
Right.
the cult or whatever. Oh, the children. Oh, the babies
I
in the
think
incubator.
the initial thought, and it's hard to say what they really did at the time this happened so long ago, but I think it wouldn't be too far-fetched to claim that the ATF wanted to justify their existence some more, and what better way than to have a very successful gun bust.
Very publicized bust.
Yeah.
Very publicized. They thought it was going to be like a hands down. We're going to go in and we're going to win this.
In and
it's
out,
going to be
nobody cares
all on
about these
TV.
guys. Crazy people, we'll just take them down, and then it'll look great for us.
We'll come out with 75 guns or something like that. It'll be all caught on camera and everything will be great. I mean, that's just how leading up to it, that's what it seemed like. It's like you called the news up, you tipped them off. The news was there before they were there, so they got probably great footage of these vehicles rolling in and helicopters coming in, and then it didn't go nearly how they wanted.
Which another thing that is really important here is they say that the Branch Davidians fired first, and they are these hostile, crazy people. You rolled in with guys with guns on open cattle trucks. Like, there's no cover, no nothing. You're completely exposed when you roll in long before the gunfire happens at all. Like, you guys are just out there in the open. If they were, like, just ready to start picking you guys off, they could have easily started picking you guys off, like, half a mile away.
Yeah, and they were saying that this road was like this is like the flattest area where you can see like 4 miles away, because like later on the press is pushed back like a mile away, and they're able to like view in all the way on the compound. That's how flat this area is. So they could have people up in like the upstairs picking people off from a half mile away. If they really wanted to ambush them, they could have probably killed a lot more than 4 people.
Sure. So I want to circle back to something we were talking about earlier about what the ATF thought would happen. Is they go in there, they get a bunch of guns, they have people arrested, they look great. Well, what's funny to note, and now this is just a very weird coincidence, is the morning of the raid, or the morning of the 28th, before the ATF shows up, the guy who was like their chief gun dealer had left the compound with something like 90% of their guns in a truck, just taking it down to Austin for a sale. And so like the majority of their guns weren't even there at the point. So it's just kind of incredible to imagine that, like, what if they didn't? What if those guns were there? How would that have changed this entire narrative? Right. But it's important to note that later on, once we get to the future a little bit, when this guy, the gun dealer, found out that this was all happening, he called the ATF. It's like, hey, I got their guns. They're right here. Want me to come down and talk to you? Like, let's work this out. Right. And they tried, like, they arrested him, but then they had to let him go. It's
crazy,
kind of a mess.
So, I mean, that could go one of two ways. I mean, like, does that indicate that that the Branch Davidians knew that something was going down, that, like, they were going to be raided and, like, they were going to be found to have more than is legal or something, and then they shipped some stuff out? Or is it more that's just their normal dealings and they
Probably the
unfortunately had
latter.
less.
Because they would always do that. I think these gun shows that they would go to. Now, these are not like private in the alley kind of gun shows. These are like giant public, like right off the highway. All the gun dealers would come to it, and these would happen weekly. So I think it was just kind of funny that the day the ATF decided to do their raid was the day that the majority of their what normal people would call inventory, the FBI and the ATF called stockpile.
Right.
You know. It wasn't there. Most of it wasn't. So that's just kind of interesting. But I guess anyway, to finish up the main events that happened on the 28th that led to the 51-day siege. Mm-hmm. So as the shootout progresses, it leads to some deaths. I think it was 6 Branch Davidians were killed and 4 ATF agents were killed on that day. Mm-hmm. The Davidians, while on the phone with the sheriff, and I guess they might have got patched into the ATF, started claiming that the helicopter was shooting at them, which was kind of a questionable thing because they claimed the helicopter wasn't shooting at them. And there was this huge back and forth in one of the interviews, or one of the documentaries, if you remember, where I think it was the negotiation guy was being very weird with his words. He was saying, "Well, there's no guns on the helicopter," and he's like, "No, they're shooting at us." And eventually, he got the Davidian got the other guy to admit, it's like, well, there's no mounted guns on the helicopter.
He said there are guys with guns on the helicopter. I can't confirm that they shot, but they weren't mounted on the helicopter. Like, it's total wordplay. Like,
it started
totally
from there are no guns, there's no way they were shooting, to, well, yeah, the guys were armed on the helicopter, and who knows, maybe they were shooting at you, but there were no mounted guns. And that was actually between him and David Koresh, because Koresh was like, that's bullshit. That's a lie, because they are shooting at us.
He acts
right
like
now.
David is insane. He's at the beginning, he's like, no, obviously. And then he slowly backpedals. He's like, well, yeah, you said this, and you're not making sense. And like massages his way into, yeah, I said that there's no mounted guns. Like, okay, are people shooting us from helicopters or are they not?
And a piece of evidence for people actually shooting from the helicopters was there was a Davidian who was on top of their water tower, who there's some footage you can see of him, what it looks like him getting shot. His corpse was left up there for days because the Davidians couldn't get him back.
5 days.
Yeah. And
they weren't
given
allowed
the
to
angle,
go and bury him.
It's unlikely that he was shot from the ground. So
it's almost impossible. He was on top of a freaking water tower. He was shot and killed. And there's a lot of bullet holes and stuff that definitely indicate that there was from above fire.
Well, I was listening to the back and forth at the congressional hearings, and they were talking about how there's bullet holes through the roof, which indicates helicopter fire. Well, I want to say it was Chuck Schumer running his mouth again. He was sitting there saying, well, our ATF agents were down on the ground shooting up in a 4-story building, so the angle up, obviously there was going to be bullet holes in the ceiling through the roof. I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. They're going through the walls and then through the ceiling.
Yeah, it doesn't take like a forensic agent to figure out that it's coming from the ground up through 2 to 3 stories through the ceiling, or it's coming down through one layer of rooftop into the compound, or the happy houses, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know.
We could just do forensic testing on this, but oh wait, the compound was burned to the ground and all the evidence is gone. So that's just I mean, that could be a coincidence.
And then after it burned to the ground, it was bulldozed.
Slight setback, yes.
So I guess all right. I think that's
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Well, let's get some of the after effects of that. Like you said, 4 ATF agents were killed. Immediately after, there was 3 Davidians who were coming back that weren't in the shootout. They were coming back home, like they had gone somewhere. I don't know if it was for this weapons deal or what, but they're coming back home. They got stopped by the ATF, and according to the ATF, one of them pulled out a handgun, and so they shot him like 11 times because of that one handgun, and then an ATF agent, as well as one of the Davidians who got arrested, because they arrested 2 of them, shot the one. Both an ATF agent and one of the ones arrested said as they were walking back, they heard 2 more bullet shots at that guy after he had already been killed. So they had put 2 more bullet shots into his head. And yeah, there was the autopsy shows 2 bullet holes into his temple afterwards. So it was like, let's just make sure this guy's dead. And it's like, that's not self-defense. Oh, this guy might be shooting me. That's like straight up execution right there.
If it's one guy with a pistol or whatever, let's say he drew something, you shoot him down. You don't have to make sure he's completely dead.
Right.
Clearly he's not taking you guys out.
And his body as well was left for 5 days out in the heat before family members were allowed to come retrieve his body and bury it.
Yeah, and there was also, there's a lot of stuff in just the horrifying treatment of these people during the 51 days. Like one of the guys was buried. They came out and buried him out front, and then they took a tank and ran over his grave 5 times or something, back and forth. After they buried him, the ATF did. Before
we move away from February 28th and get into the siege, because the siege, there's so much to talk about with the 51-day siege. But on February 28th, if you just watch videos, it looks like a straight up, something you would see in Afghanistan, a village raid in Afghanistan or something like that. It doesn't look like a police operation. This is a full-fledged military tactical operation. There's people if they were just going to serve search warrants, immediately there's people on ladders climbing onto the roof. They had this all planned out. They had didn't they stage it in Fort Knox or something, or practice for months for this delivering this search warrant.
Justin would have to weigh in on that. I don't know.
Yeah. There was a lot of practice raids working with the military on getting this, what you would expect to be to walk to the door, knock, and say, police, warrant, let's talk. It seems like they were preparing for something bad to happen.
I mean, I understand if you expect that they could be violent, you bring in some backup, maybe bring in 10, 15 officers with you or something, to stay back in case something does happen as you deliver it. But like we said before, there is no evidence that they intended at all to deliver a search warrant or even just arrest David Koresh. The evidence, everything points at, we want to go in and raid this place and have a full-fledged military-style raid.
And as you mentioned earlier, Craig, when we were talking about Koresh, they could have picked him up at any time. He would go out every single day. He'd go jogging, go to Walmart, go to restaurants at any point. If they wanted to get him, it's not like he was hiding. So it's just very suspect, to say the least.
All right. So now 4 agents dead. You know what happens when a cop's killed?
FBI gets in.
Well, people, they just want instant revenge. They're going to get their pound for pound flesh. And I mean, as it sounds, that's the case when a military member or a cop or somebody gets killed, one of your own gets killed, you want revenge. And so things just go and escalate from there really quickly.
Yeah, so basically over the next almost 2 months, there's consistent contact with the people inside Mount Carmel and with the FBI. Some people leave on their own free will, again proving that Koresh wasn't holding anyone there. They had to stay. Everyone who was staying inside because they didn't want to release their kids out into what was outside, out into Babylon, as they might have put it.
Yeah. Well, rightfully so. Well, yeah. Almost immediately tanks rolled up. How many tanks? 4 to 5 tanks rolled up. The people who were around the tanks were mooning the compound and flipping them off, and it's just for a bunch of super religious background. These kids barely even watch TV. It's and now there's these horrible people out there, just what you'd call heathens out in the world. And it's just why would I release my children to?
Very disrespectful. Right. Just if this is really a two-sided altercation and we're just at a standstill here, then why are you guys being douchebags? Let's talk about it.
Right. And they definitely talked about the difference between the negotiating team and the tactical team there. They weren't ever on the same page. The negotiators would say, oh, we're going to do this, and we're not going to cut the power. And then all of a sudden the tactical team would be being douchebags out there provoking them and then half an hour later they'd go cut the power or something like that to the compound. And
At what point did the audio tape come out of the little girl saying, "Are you gonna come kill me? Are you guys gonna kill me?"
So,
Go ahead,
so
Justin.
It's I don't remember exactly, just to get the context to the listeners. In the documentaries, and at the end we'll go through all these, give all the resources of everything and what to watch and everything. But they gave videotapes to the people inside Mount Carmel, and they released video footage of the people inside to show we're okay, this is what we're doing. Koresh wanted to release some things out to the world, and as you mentioned, there were some kids who were legitimately horrified. You know, they thought that they were killed.
They've
And-
seen 6 people die.
Well, and that's how they've been raised, like taught that Babylon is going to come in and like come at them and destroy them all, or attempt to destroy them all. And they are seeing all this quote unquote prophecy coming true right before their eyes. Like everything that David Koresh has been teaching them for years now, or since the kids were born, it's just like, well, this is all coming true now. And obviously, I would be terrified in that situation. I'd be terrified as the adults in this situation, let alone the kids.
And to be clear, none of us are like huge David Koresh sympathizers, I assume. I mean, like there was probably some weird stuff going on, but the real question is like, what was legal and what was illegal enough to warrant the actions that were taken. So we're not like
David
Branch Davidians here defending it.
Whatever David Koresh did, it did not justify what happened to those children. No. Nothing could have justified what happened to those children.
Right.
So
go into. Did you talk about the psychological warfare yet?
Yeah, I was literally just going to bring that up. So we talked because you had mentioned mooning earlier, and I wanted to expand upon, what did the outside do to the people inside? Because if they were claiming that they just wanted to, save the kids and get the people out safely, I mean, not only did they cut power, they cut water to the point where the Davidians literally had to put buckets outside to collect rainwater they were rationing water to survive.
Right.
They were shining bright lights at nighttime so they couldn't sleep. They were playing the sounds of a slaughterhouse of animals being killed all throughout the night to disturb not only the adults, but obviously the children too. Right, I don't think that was intent, but an unfortunate consequence. And what was that song in the documentary?
I don't remember. I was going to say
the boot song. These boots are made for walking.
Oh,
yeah. They were spamming that song nonstop.
Right. And playing over loudspeakers and bright lights, just like psychological warfare, trying to break these people of their mental capacities. And they're saying that these people are crazy to begin with, and they just want peace. They just want to, get to the bottom of the situation, but they're trying to mentally break these people.
Well, that's what I had got, like what I had thought was, you're under the impression that David Koresh is an insane person who is trigger happy, obviously, because he just supposedly ambushed you and shot up a bunch of your agents. So let's drive him more insane.
Let's make him mad and see how he responds.
Let's make him snap completely.
Like, I mean, there probably isn't, but you would think there'd be something illegal about that action, because it's like, you're not trying to resolve the situation. You're not trying to do anything other than give yourself more of a reason to go in and fulfill your action. You're trying to make them push back just so that you can be justified in taking further action.
Right.
There was a point during an FBI press conference, and one of the reporters was like, "Can you go into the allegations of psychological warfare that are going on every night?" And he's like, "I'm not sure what you're talking about." And she's
we just love that song.
Well, she's like, that's what she was. The person was like, "Well, there's reports that you're blasting Nancy Sinatra. There's reports that you're shining lights, cutting the power." And he's like, "I'm not sure about that, but it's highly unlikely." And it's just like, come on. Like, they were covered, like, from day one, from the initial screw up with the failed raid, it was just a constant cover our ass for the rest of this time. Like, they pushed the whole time during the siege, this is when they pushed the media clear back like a mile away from the front side of the compound.
I want to say it was like 3 miles or something.
It was long ways away. And so they still had a view of the one side of the compound, but all the military actions and what they were doing was on the other side of the compound. So anything that they would have been doing wouldn't have necessarily been picked up on camera because they were pushed so far away. It's just like, we don't want our asses to show anymore, and we're going to make sure we cover them completely from now on for 51 days.
Right, and the Branch Davidians they put out the iconic banner that says, like, we want the media, basically, like, we want to talk to the press. And there's video in one of the documentaries where they have video of some of the press people, and they're like, well, guess what? We are the press. But it's like, if you guys are being pushed back, then what difference does it make?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there was another banner where it was like Rodney King, we understand.
Yeah.
There was some. It was pretty.
That was,
unfortunate.
I think, the same year, or just the following year from the whole Rodney King incident. And so there's all kinds of tension between the government and humanity right now. This was not long after the Ruby Ridge incident, which we've never really talked about, but that's a whole nother story. But
We'll get to that towards the end. Yeah.
right.
We'll
So there's just a lot of conflict already between like big government and just like normal citizens. Did you guys ever watch the Bill Hicks version, like documentary where he rolled in and was trying to get some footage?
No,
Yeah.
I haven't.
Yeah.
That sounds
Bill
fantastic.
Hicks took his
Like while it was going on, or
producer
afterward?
guy. Yeah, this was like day 7 when Bill Hicks was trying to roll in.
Whether he's Alex
and get
Jones or
close.
not, I need to see that.
Right. Well, he doesn't really get too much. You can tell he's like probably wasted the whole time. But because he keeps going into the Branch Davidian breakaway of the Seventh-day Adventist Zionist sect, and he keeps expanding on it every time he says it, so it turns into the Catholic Lutheran branch of the Seventh-day Mormon Zion. So you can tell he's like wasted. But at one point, the thing I wanted to point out was when they first got there, and they rolled up to one of the checkpoints, and he's like, yeah. They're like, where are you going? He's like, I'm just want to get as close as I can. That's where I want to go. And he's like, do you got a press pass? And he's like, I didn't know we'd need a press pass. He's like, well, there's a lot of people forming up there to watch the show, is basically what the guy says.
gosh.
Like, this is like a big show. Like, public is like forming along the mountain ridge or the higher ground up there, and just basically to watch it and see what happens. Like it's a reality show at this point.
Yeah, it makes it seem like the government took it as like no concern here. This is going to go our way. There's not going to be any pushback, no blowback, no nothing. Like, this is a show. You can stand over there and watch. This is going to be fine. It'll all be wrapped up shortly.
I want to give some credibility to the government on a couple things. And that's not really credibility, but I want to give try to be as fair as possible.
Just kidding.
So, I mean, David Koresh and the hostage negotiation team, when they were talking a lot about when are they going to come out, there were a lot of back and forth about Koresh saying, I'll come out after this. And then
God
it was
told
something
him
like,
not to.
yeah, God told him not to. Now, whether or not we believe God actually spoke to the man, whether or not he actually believed he was told that's a very hard question to answer. But eventually, I wanted to get to this point. Towards the end in April, Koresh announced that God had spoken with him about an important part of their whole religion is about the 7 seals and Revelations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was that. And the whole point was to try to like decipher them and figure out what they meant, because I'm not super familiar with this, but it's something like there's a lot of cryptic commentary in there or something.
From what I heard, most Christians or most religions that follow the Bible believe that we won't know exactly what it says until the returning of Christ, and he interprets it for us. And he actually believed that too. Yeah. Because he had said that God had told him not to write anything. Well, then at this point, he, like you said, he come out and said, God just told me to start writing, and he's giving me the interpretation now.
Honestly,
that's where that comes from.
Being, like I said, a guy who didn't know really anything about this beforehand until maybe 2-3 weeks ago. That was kind of the most compelling stuff to me. Like, whether this guy's crazy or not, that's very compelling to have a guy who's like, yeah, I'm not going to write anything because God told me not to, and now I'm going to interpret this stuff. Like, I want to dig into that more. I didn't have a chance to, but we're not really here to break down David Koresh as much as we are to talk about the siege.
I would like to see. I don't think they probably haven't. I would like to see his translation, to actually read
Absolutely.
his translation.
That's what I'm
saying. I mean,
it actually
that's
survived.
Yeah, I saw that they had actually pulled pulled a bunch out of the fire,
which is proof that he actually was working on it. I believe he had translated the first seal, and he was working on the second when, and now we get to the famous day of.
Before we get there,
yep.
The fact that it survived was a really compelling point to me, because that's not normal conspiracy stuff. Like, normally in a conspiracy, you've got a fire and something survives that is damning to the people that are being talked about. Like the passport on 9/11, or there's always a piece of paper that proves that the conspiracy is wrong. But this time, there was a thing that survived that was a collection of papers that actually proved that he was, doing what he said he was doing. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, when they decided enough's enough, a lot of, like, the higher ups in the FBI were like, well, he keeps stalling on us. He's saying he's writing these. He's not doing it. He's not meeting his end of the bargain. He's just stalling. He's just making up another lie to stall for this. But the fact that some of it survived means he was actually holding up to his end of the deal. He was actually writing these.
So, yeah, my point is, it's crazy that came out to prove in his favor that he was actually writing something.
I will give $100 to the person that finds those papers and lets me read them.
Maybe you should ask, has anybody posted these online or anything before you offer up money for something that is common knowledge?
It's only $100. Yeah, somebody will Google it, like, email it to me tomorrow. It's like, damn it.
Yep.
No, I want the actual papers. I don't want an email. I want the actual original documents.
Well,
for $100.
That's quite a steal.
Oh, yeah, they're for free online. I just pulled them up.
Yeah,
right
that's
here.
what I thought. How much is redacted? Are there, like, blacked out parts?
No. If this is it, I'm not sure. I just googled Koresh seals. This might not be it. But whatever. I'll look. We'll look into this.
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. Nobody comes to the systems down for. Nobody comes to the systems down for hardcore, like, foolproof knowledge. So let's continue.
Great. So basically, as Craig had mentioned earlier, there were tanks that were brought eventually, and throughout this entire time leading up until the 19th, when they were deciding, what are they going to do? How are they going to get these people out of there and end this thing? Because that's really what at that point most Americans were like, they just want this to be done. Unfortunately, they just wanted these people dead at this point. They didn't really care about them coming out alive. The tanks had been clearing out and destroying everything around Mount Carmel, destroying go-karts, destroying vehicles, destroying smaller structures, just clearing everything out.
Clearing the trees, anything that's going to potentially block any view. Or
do we know if that's, like, I don't know, like, was that intentionally a show of force? Was it, like, called on, like, was it ordered to happen, or was it?
I think it was strategic, personally.
Well, I mean, these guys, from what we say with, like, the running over the graves with the tanks that were freshly dug, like mooning people, flipping people off, it could have just been a dick move. Like,
right. Well, yeah, and then, I mean, on the final day, on the 19th of April, when the fire happens, which we'll get to in a minute, I mean, they literally raised the ATF and FBI flag in place of their own flag on their flagpole.
That was the most dick move I had seen on the whole thing. That was a whole.
It was not professional at all.
Wasn't professional.
These are like the OG video game trolls right here. Like, these guys came in, killed a bunch of people, and then they raised their flag and, like, middle fingers.
Right. At points leading up to this final day, there was a point where this grandma of one of the people inside wanted to come. She said if she could talk to her grandson, she could get him to exit the compound or put down his weapons and stuff.
Yeah. Wait, wasn't that Koresh's grandmother?
I can't remember whose grandma it was. I just heard it was a member of somebody in there, like one of the members.
I could be wrong,
So,
but I don't think it was Koresh's. It might have been.
well,
I could be wrong.
Yeah, she had said she had finished talking to him and went to leave, and one of the people, and this was shortly before the last day, one of the people was like, hope she knows that's like her last chance to say goodbye, or something like that, something ridiculous like that. Like they knew something was coming, or they had no intention. At least their attitude was, these people aren't coming out alive at this point. Like even if they didn't necessarily have it planned, members of the people, like the FBI
the
around,
with the guns,
their attitude,
their ready to fire, we're ready to go.
Right, their attitude was they're not coming out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So, which
it's a game, and it's played as a game against crazy people, so people don't care that these are people.
Well, so I think we should talk a little bit about Janet Reno's involvement, the Attorney General, the plan on how are they going to get these kids out, the idea of the use of CS gas as a way of,
have either one of you experienced CS gas?
I have not.
Nope.
Experienced CS
Sounds
gas.
fun.
I have.
You have?
Yes. It is miserable. CS gas is not a gas. It's like a fine powder actually that's carried by air. So it resembles a gas. And so this fine powder gets in like your mucous membranes and stuff and just burns the hell out of you. For the most part, isn't going to kill you normally when it's like controlled. But still, if you're not wearing a gas mask, it is damn near impossible to breathe, impossible to see anything. So the thought of escaping after you've been gassed as much as they appear to be shooting into this compound, I don't understand how people could get out if they wanted to, because like I said, it gets in your eyes, it gets in your, like they tell you not to, because I had to do gas chamber drills in the military and then it was using CS gas, and they tell you not to wear contacts in because if some of the powder gets behind your contacts, it'll damage your corneas, it'll like scratch your corneas. So it's just
so you're going in
like,
blind and leaving blinder.
Pretty much, yes. Or you wear glasses under your gas mask. Anyway, it's just miserable. Like, you can go back into Janet Reno's plan. I just wanted to talk about CS gas for a second because
we'll definitely get to that.
All right, guys. Before we get into Janet Reno, I'm going to wrap up the first half of this because that'll make my editing job way easier later, and say that we're going to pick up again in a week or maybe a couple weeks with Janet Reno. All right, guys. Thanks for coming on. Hey, guys. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. This was the first half of a two-parter. The second half will be coming probably in a couple weeks because I've got something special planned for next week. But I'm not going to make you wait too long because I do think that this is a story that needs to be shared right away. In the meantime, if you could please go check out the Downers Club for as little as $1 a month, that would make me super happy. And there's no risk. You can join for $1. You can try it out for a month. In that month, you're probably going to be getting 16 or 17 bonus episodes for that $1. And if that's not good enough for you, the second month, you can just cancel. No hard feelings. To join, just go to tsidpod.com/support. Also, go check out the System is Down forum. That is completely free. And it's a great way for you to find and interact with people that like the same weird stuff that you do. You can find that by going to tsidpod.com/forum or just going to Facebook and typing in the System is Down forum. Also, please go to iTunes and subscribe and review the show. That is one of the best ways for you to, for no expense, help us grow and legitimize the show. Also, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is fb.com/the system is down. Twitter is at tsidpod. Do all of that, and I'll be back here next week with some more uncomfortable content for you. Until then, question everything and stay uncomfortable. Thanks. This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.